I missed the chance just a little bit ago to thank Chief Stanley. So you guys at home and everybody in the budget, you probably see I've got a kid or two usually, or three walking behind me. And, two departments have helped me in terms of educating my children today at home. So Chief Stanley and Firefighter John were providing fire safety this morning and yesterday. So that was awesome. I helped them with a fire escape plan. And like clockwork, Public Works drove by twice today, picking up leaves and cleaning the streets. So two city departments helped with educating children at home. And I'm just wondering what Ray's going to offer for educating some of my children at home this afternoon while he's given budget here. So.
Well, no pressure, Ray.
Which park do you live near, Matt? We can send somebody out.
Right. Good answer.
Madam Mayor, I think it's time for parks. Ray, I see several of your division heads, so I'm not sure where you want to start first.
Yeah, I hear some background noise from delayed video, though. I don't know if anybody else does. No?
Just your imagination, Ray.
No, I can hear Matt talking to you. Anyways, all right, well, we're going to try to keep you awake after the lunch hour, just like a college professor normally would. So as Mark said, we've got Bill Sturm, Landscape Operations Manager, Chad Dahlman, Assistant Parks Director, Jenny McColian, Revenue Facilities Manager, and Gene Wollerman, the Senior Center Division Manager. So we're going to go through, we have 9 different budgets for our department. Some of those should go really quick. Others may be a little more in depth. But I'll say that as we go through all the budgets, you're going to see and hear how we contribute to the city strategic plan by enhancing our quality of life services and assets, strengthening our neighborhoods, promoting and developing public-private partnerships, helping provide a safe, secure, and healthy community, and improving and maintaining our infrastructure. So many of our goals and accomplishments cross over into some of the CIP projects. So we may touch on some of those as we're going through the operations, but then I left some time at the end for any questions on CIP as well. The first one we're going to start out with is the Parks General Fund, which is on page 103. I'll kick this off. The parks budget in the general fund shows an increase of about 2.4% for next year over 2020. We did our best to keep it at a 0% outside of personnel expenses as well as utilities and so forth. Some of the accomplishments, actually this year, Matt, before we kicked off, you were talking that we didn't have a lot of scheduled events on the athletic fields, but what this really allowed us to do, along with the good weather we had this summer compared to a couple years in the past, really got a lot of projects that were lingering and off of our to-do list. So the first one that I want to talk about real quick is Congress Avenue Tot Lot, the play equipment. We worked very closely with the Congress Avenue Neighborhood Association. We solicited the designs from the different vendors. We narrowed it down to about the top 6 that we preferred, and then we take it out to the neighborhood group and let them vote on their design that they'd like to see in their neighborhood park, and that's what they did. So we got that project completed. There's some new trees that are getting installed, I believe, this week with Bill Sturm and some of his crew. And then we have the fence installation that'll take place the first week in November. That goes back along Beach Street and Congress Avenue. So by the second week in November, that project will be buttoned up completely. The next project is Spanbauer Field, Southside Lighted for you senior members of the community. That restroom facility was renovated this year, and we're just finishing that project up. This is a culmination of about a 10 years worth of park restroom projects that the council and the city manager have supported in our CIP. I think we've done one restroom per year roughly. And so we're winding down on the number of restrooms that are on our list. So having this one done will help because the ball diamond's done and it's going to be heavily utilized, hopefully going into next year. The next project was the outdoor exercise equipment at Menomonee Park. That was installed. Again, we work closely with the neighborhood association there. They actually came forward with the project. We worked with them to narrow down the pieces of equipment and then went ahead and purchased those. And we installed 3 pieces by the new community playground and 3 pieces along the new trail on Hazel Street. And what we did in working with the neighbors is they wanted to have some of the pieces that were wheelchair accessible across from Bella Vista because there's a number of residents that utilize the park. So the 3 pieces that are across from Bella Vista are actually wheelchair accessible. So that's been a real neat addition to our the park over there, and hopefully you've been able to check that out. Community playground, as I touched on, although that project started last fall, we really got the majority of it completed this year. Bill Sturm staff helped out with some of the landscaping around there, really improved the visual and the sight lines for us in the police department. And the project, I think, really turned out very nice. We still have some entryway improvements to make as far as some of the paver brick replacements and other things, but those are smaller pieces we can work on. And we also are working and having on security cameras installed. That's scheduled for next week on some of the light poles around that area because we've had a number of vandalism issues throughout the park system all year. Just a side note on the community built playground. That is a Burke manufacturing product out of North Fond du Lac, and they're very proud of the project and how it turned out. It was the biggest project that they had constructed in the state when they put it in last fall. And so they were in late this summer to do a photo shoot with a number of volunteer youth and parents and families to be involved. And essentially, we're going to be their centerfold for their product catalog in 2021. So pretty cool to be involved with that. And we'll be able to share some pictures and some photos once we get the new catalogs. Those usually come out around the holidays and fall. So another project I wanted to bring up was the Bowen Street fishing dock. We replaced that wood decking with composite materials. And that was a project we worked on closely with Otter Street Fishing Club and Battle on Bago. Those 2 entities actually provided 50% of the cost match and some of the materials for that project. So again, just another project that we work closely with a number of different groups with. The other project is the design for Lakeshore Park, the initial phase 1 update. I'll touch on it now, but I can do that a little bit further once we get into the CIP as well. Where we're at is we've hired the consultant. As council knows, you awarded that agreement to Smith Group. We had our initial meeting with them virtually, and then last week they were in person with us here in the city to visit the site, start taking a look at some of the site background information. And then we also had a virtual meeting with the adjacent neighbor. One of the adjacent neighbors had voiced some concerns with how the master plan looks, some of the concepts, whether it was the parking lot possibly being a little too close to their property or the splash pad maybe being possibly relocated somewhere else. What we were able to do, because the master plan is, as you know, is a 30,000 foot view. Now, as we start honing in on those individual design pieces, we start moving those around based on the land features, based on the vegetation. And so working with Smith Group on last Monday morning, we're able to come up with a design, at least conceptually, to try to preserve as many trees as we can, as well as increasing the buffer between that one property and the parking lot. So doing a hand-drawn sketch, as the landscape architects like to do that morning, and then in the afternoon, we had that neighbor on a virtual meeting, shared the information with them. They were very, very appreciative, very supportive of what they're seeing as far as the revisions to the project. And they were actually going to write me an email or a letter to that effect so that we can share that with the council and other boards and committees that they might have contacted. So I'm very happy to hear that because that gives us an opportunity to continue moving forward. So the next steps are, I plan for the Smith Group to be at the November 9th Park Board meeting. And what they'll be doing between now and then is, again, working conceptually on where they feel things can fit on that first phase. And to remind you, the initial phase 1 is the Four Seasons building, the plaza area around that, and then the associated parking lot. And that's really the extent of where our roughly $2 million budget is going to get us. And that might be being stretched. So right now we're in that phase where we're working with the engineers, stormwater with the city, and just trying to verify what is the actual cost going to be based on the conditions out there. We did have, we worked with James Robbie and his staff late last week. We did have their contractor come in and do soil borings in the areas of the improvements for this phase 1. So we're waiting to hear those reports. So it's moving forward. And by the time the Parks Board meeting in November rolls around, I think we're going to be on the way towards some design ideas for that area, as well as some conceptual ideas for what the Four Seasons building could look like. So we're going to get public input. That'll all start on that November 9th meeting. Throughout the process, they're going to have the opportunity a couple times at Parks Board. That will all have to go through Plan Commission as well as Common Council. So there's a number of opportunities for the public to provide their thoughts and input to what's going on there. So those were the big accomplishments as far as parks go. Looking at the goals for 21, I'm going back and forth here. The first one is to replace the play equipment at West Haven Circle Park. That's a project in the CIP that, if it gets approved, will take place. Renovate the ball field at West Haven Circle Park. That was actually in this year's CIP. We've started that process with the design and layout, but it got too late in the season for us to continue. So we're going to plan to bid that out shortly after the first of the year, with construction of that to be early spring next year. So we'll have another ball field that needed repairs and renovations completed as we get into next summer and fall. A project that we're pretty excited about is the reconstruction of the tennis courts at South Park. What we are in our plans would be to incorporate some pickleball courts similar to what we did at Menomonee Park. So that's in the CIP as well. We have had a number of requests throughout the city for more pickleball courts. Specifically, as we get to the west side, we've got a number of players that obviously live over there. So getting into South Park, I think, is going to accommodate some of those comments and questions we get from some of those neighbors, so they don't have to travel all the way across to Menomonee Park. The final project will be hopefully design of a new Parks Administration and Operations building. I think when I was watching yesterday, City Manager Roloff mentioned that we were able to get it into a plan where we think we can spread the funding over 3 years. And again, I can talk about that more as we get into the CIP. So just wanted to let you know those are some of our big goals for 21. A couple things in the parks budget itself. It does have built in a $5 increase in the shelter rental fees. That is something that the Advisory Parks Board looked at back in August and unanimously recommended the increase in those fees. Those were last increased in 2014. But what we've been able to introduce since then is the online reservation system, acceptance of credit and debit cards. So there's some additional administrative fees that we're trying to help cover with some of these increases. So the Parks Board did recommend that $5 increase across the board for the shelters. And we'll be working with finance to bring all those fees for our department forward later this year. I did make a note of one item. It's going to be on page 104, and this is really for Russ and Jennifer. The total personnel cost for the current budget is 18.8. You can take a look at this year. We actually only had about 18.4. Reason we're down this year is we held off bringing in some of our seasonal staff early on due to COVID. And we also were using some staff from other departments and divisions to help us during the summer when they might not have had enough work in their divisions or their departments. But in 2021, we need to bump that number back up to the 18.8. If you'll see the seasonal help, some reason that the 2.62 got carried over to next year, but we need to put that back up to the 2.93. So we're back up to 18.8. So no additional personnel, but basically status quo. That's a lot of the information. Again, the budget is only an increase of about 2.4%, so no big surprises. And the projects that I highlighted are really the highlights for the parks. If I'm going to rely on you guys to jump in, but otherwise I'm going to keep you moving because I think you've been moving pretty well. So the next project or the next budget is forestry, which is on page 108. And looking at the forestry budget over the budget for 21, looks like an increase of about 1.5% above this year's. I'm going to have Bill jump in on a couple of these items because a few of the accomplishments are things that have really been time consuming, but there's also some good planning things. And Bill will go into more detail, but a little bit about the pruning cycle. This will be our 4th season of doing a pruning cycle. What we've done is broken the community down into 5 areas basically. And what Bill and his staff try to do is get to those 5 areas over the 5-year period, trying to be a little more proactive and not chasing our tails on complaints of tree issues. So Bill can talk a little bit about that. The emerald ash borer really took hold this year in the city, and it's really been a time-consuming effort for Bill and his staff. But then also talk about the successful donations and grants that Bill was able to work on, and including the Memorial Tree Program, which we've seen a number of increases in this year. So, Bill, you want to jump in on some of those?
Oh, sure. The pruning cycle has been a nice way to handle a lot of our areas. We've been expanding the tree inventory extensively over the last number of years. So it's we've been systematically going through each area to try to cycle it within a 5-year period. There's still a little bit of running around in some of the new plantings where we like to prune those a little more often. So we've been doing some training pruning on a more routine basis on some of those areas. We've definitely been very busy with the emerald ash borer situation throughout the community. We've had a lot of mortality. Our inventory at one point was 17% ash. And so we have a active treatment program where we have about 600 trees under treatment for protection from emerald ash borer. But then there's also a lot of trees that, because of their size and the cost of treatment, we've decided to just let some of those go, and we'll replace those with a variety of different species. So most of our plantings are multi-species now, so that in the future, if any insect or disease problems arise, we won't lose such a vast amount of our inventory through that. The other thing Ray mentioned was our success with the grants, and we've been doing very well in that category. Last year, we did a small grant with the U.S. Forest Service where we were able to plant a number of trees along the Riverwalk. We've also had a very generous grant from the Thousand Friends of Wisconsin, which has allowed us to do some plantings around some of the school areas, which are fairly extensive. And so we've received a $15,000 grant for that. And then currently we're working on a Wisconsin DNR urban forestry grant project that we actually just received the trees today. We're working in the Sawyer Payne and Congress Field Neighborhood Association areas. So we'll begin planting those trees next week on Monday, weather permitting. So we'll be able to fill in some of those areas where we don't have a lot of trees currently. So we've been pretty good with the grants here recently. The DNR grant, we also have been leveraging some of the funds that have been held at the Oshkosh Area Community Foundation in the Taking Root Fund. And so we've used some of that capital to help us with the match for the DNR grants, because those are usually a 50% contribution by the community. So we've been actually doing quite a bit using some of those funds as backing for larger grants. So we hope that the tree planting grant opportunities continue so that we can continue to fill in some of these areas that are lacking trees currently. As Ray mentioned, we also had a very active program with Memorial Tree Program this year. To date, as of this morning, I had 25 orders, which is basically a $10,000 revenue source for us. We've seen kind of an uptick this year due to probably COVID, but a lot of people have an interest in contributing toward memorial trees, which are primarily placed out within the parks. So actually last week we even had some Girl Scout groups come out and help us with some of the installation of those trees. So we're still trying to do a little outreach through that program and hopefully generate a little further interest to try to get more trees contributed for the parks. That's about it, unless anybody has any questions regarding any of those programs.
I just had two things, Bill, I made note of I wanted to add yet too is as part of the budget, we do still receive a $6,500 donation from the Community Foundation from the Taking Root Fund. And that helps Bill with about 1.5 to 2 seasonal positions to help him continue to maintain all the trees that we have been planting and make sure that they're able to be successful in those first couple of years. So again, that's a fund that has really been given back to the community, not only in what you can see, but the staffing to help to continue to maintain that. And then as he was talking about his grants, I wanted to touch real quickly on Ann Schafer, who is a shared position between Parks, Senior Center, and Planning. Ann works closely with the neighborhood associations, but she also is our connection to those neighborhood associations. And Bill and Alexa in Planning and Ann have been successful in leveraging that partnership for some of these grants. And then Bill is able to work with the neighborhood associations on potential planting sites. And so it's been a real good connection of departmental and division cooperation.
Yeah, real quick question. That gift from the Community Foundation, how long is that going to last? Is that?
Bill, you want to address that?
They do have funds held there. So we are being very careful to not get into the principal too much. The intent was to make this a self-sustaining fund so that it would be a longer term source of funding for smaller projects. So we've worked it out so we don't draw it down to zero, and we continue to help build interest in the fund, and they are currently still accepting contributions. So our hope was to establish it as a more of an endowed fund so that we would continually be able to reap benefits for many years to come through that program.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yes, it's been an awesome program for the community.
Had a meeting with some folks with one of the other foundations in town the other day, and they expressed continued support for this program. So I think Bill's outlook is pretty consistent with what I heard as well.
If there's nothing else, we'll continue to move through. The next one is going to be on page 133. And this is the Senior Center Revolving Fund. And for the new council members, this is really a programming fund for the Senior Center. There is no tax levy support here. It's really driven by revenue, donations, sponsorships, and it gives staff at the Senior Center flexibility. If they see a new program or something comes up mid-year where they want to give it a try, they have this budget. We're able to, again, charge a fee and cover costs and offer activities for the community. So this one is, it's almost a money in, money out with a pretty good fund balance that's been building over the couple of years. And Gene can talk a little bit about some of the programming, because obviously with everybody pre-COVID, things were going along great. Gene and her staff were really going well on the fitness side of things. And then COVID hit and we had to shift into more of a virtual outreach to the community. And I'll let Gene go into some of that as far as what the programming looked like.
So, okay. So as Ray said, our 201 account, some of the accomplishments that we did do in 2020 so far, we did shift into some virtual programming, which was a definite learning experience for everybody. But We, mainly Jane Wells, put together about 35 virtual programming opportunities for people. And approximately about 111 people have participated in the virtual. So not a high number, as you know, senior citizens don't have the capability of really getting on virtually. But I think as time goes on, that's going to be part of their routine as we go forward. We also got done with taping of the outdoor fitness equipment. So we took our fitness coordinator, went out to the park, and he went through each piece of equipment. So you'll start seeing that probably with on channel 10, so that the community can really know how to operate those pieces of equipment. So that was something that we really wanted to do to help people understand those pieces of equipment. As far as our programming, again, it was going really well. Our numbers were high in January and February. We get insurance reimbursement and for the different scans from Medicare reimbursement programs. We saw probably an increase of about $1,000 in January and February. And then mid-March, when this all hit, we definitely have lost quite a bit of finances through the COVID time period. So when that all hit us, our staff shifted again into more of the virtual world. We took advantage of the free programs or very low cost fitness certifications that were out there. So a couple of our staff had gotten certifications, which were a wonderful bonus for us. And we're able to learn a lot more about fitness and activities and programs through that. Our nail care program, we have done for many years a partnership with the Valley VNA. When we stopped, we found that our nail care program participants were calling to really find out, can we get that taken care of again? Mid-May, we opened up our nail care program only. When we did start seeing individuals come back, we knew that that was a health issue. So we really wanted to continue that. And going forward, we have seen 66 new participants that came to the center that went through the nail care program, because of the fact that a lot of other sites were not open and still are not open. So once a lot of individuals found out that we were running the program, they did come here to us and traveled from even Appleton to come. So that is a program that we feel needs to continue and needs to give that service to individuals.
I think, throughout this time, we've tried to keep the council and the public updated on the senior center and the slow reopening. And I think Jean did a wonderful job staying in touch with her colleagues across the state and in the valley, being cautious, making sure that we kept the city manager and the health department and the Chief Stanley involved in the decisions. And we started to slowly look at bringing more programs back. And then we've seen this spike again. So we are still, the Fox Fitness Center is still available by appointment only, limited number of people coming in. And then Jean is working with, they were providing some outdoor fitness classes, and they were having about 10 to 12 people per program, that they're going to slowly start moving that indoors. And that's really at the request of those participating as well. So it's the comfort level of those involved, the spacing that's available at the senior center, and then our cleaning protocols that Jean and her staff have put into place. I wanted to also make, and the council may be aware of this, but when the elections throughout the year took place, especially the spring election, Jean and her staff really stepped up. We had some of her staff at City Hall for weeks on end helping out, and they really helped out in all sorts of areas because they were closed, but they were still offering some programs. Once we get into the zoo, I'll talk more about it, but We limited the number of people going into the zoo at one time, and we had senior center staff at the front gate of the zoo being those people that were watching people coming in and monitoring that. So they've been really flexible, helping out in the parks. We had them all cleaning with our crews most of the summer, and in addition to what the activities they were doing. So the next, I'm sorry if there's nothing on that program fund, because she does have another fund and they kind of blend into each other. But the next one is going to be on page 161.
Actually, I'm sorry to interrupt, Ray. That was page 163 where I think, right? I just had a question about the county aid to health and the nail care program. Is the nail care program subsidized to some degree by county health, that 4246?
No. Participants pay for that service, and then we contract with the Valley VNA a certain amount. So then we send them at the end of each month the amount based off of the time that the nurse is here. And then whatever is left from the participants' fees, then it stays with us here at the center. So it is not subsidized by the county grant.
Okay. Ray, then what is that county aid part, the 4246? Is that just kind of a general contribution?
Which page are you on again, Mayor? I'm sorry.
Page 163, revenue item 4246. It's just a small amount. It's like 30-some thousand.
It's going up to 43, so it's Gene was just moving to that section anyway, so.
Yep. Yeah, we can jump into that one. That's okay. This is the 231 account, or this is the levy supported senior center budget. And I'll just kind of kick it off and then we can get into your question, Mayor. But in the 231, again, we're on page 161. This budget, it's going up about 3.7%, but you'll notice that the tax levy support is remaining the same. So Jean and her staff have looked at other ways to help offset that increase. So tax levy stays the same. And this budget really accounts for those overhead items, the facility, the staffing and so forth. So Jean can talk about, and the biggest one here that I wanted to spend some time on is the Helen Bader grant that we received and some of the benefits of that. But Jean, do you have an answer for the mayor on the county aid grant?
Yeah, the two county aids, when quite a while ago, I think it was split into two forms, whether it be wellness activities and then fitness activities. So actually they are one grant that we receive from them. So a lot of the wellness, it's not out of the nail care program. It's kind of the other wellness programming that we do here at the center. And of course, it's a partnership. We also have UW Oshkosh come and help us with some wellness activities, their nursing program. So we haven't been able to do that in 2019 or 2020. But the county still gives us those funds each month.
Does that answer your question, Mayor?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Jean, you want to go into some of your accomplishments and goals and so forth?
So in the 231 account, if you haven't come by the senior center, we did get some new signs that have been installed, and currently right now we're getting new siding on the north facility, so you'll see a new sign up there as soon as they're done with that siding. Back in late winter, we did hire a new fitness coordinator, and again, that has been a wonderful asset to for the center to have a full-time fitness coordinator. We saw high need in that. Anne did apply for a grant for us, a technology grant. We received notice in December that we were awarded that, and to start the program offerings in February, but obviously we were going to kick off and start, and then all of a sudden, we were put on hold. So we were allowed to postpone that program until August. So that's what we started. And if you haven't seen a lot of the write-ups in the Herald and in our newsletter. All of that is connected with the Helen Bader Fund. So this year we were able to spend 119,000 was put into that budget 231, and then 33 will get transferred into or added into the 2021. So the about $50,000 was spent currently for new furniture that is in the south building right now. So if you want to come on over and take a look at that new furniture, it really has totally enhanced the look of the south facility. So the program is called Connect Through Tech, and again, that had been kicked off in August, September, and it's a lot of one-on-one, a lot of individuals coming in, working with two staff people that we hired through this grant, and working with all sorts of technology questions and issues. And so currently we have seen about 76 visits, and again, it's like 1 or 2 people per time frame.
Councilmember Ford and Erickson, I know we just got our tour set up with you mid-November, I think. So if you don't get over there, we'll make sure and get you into the senior center, and you'll be able to see the new furniture. It really is added to the facility over there. I did want to touch on the GO-H&I relationship with Connect Through Tech, and you heard their report at your council meeting recently, but that's been another good partnership between the senior center and the neighborhood groups and GO-H&I. They're really the ones that are helping us to identify some of those seniors in each neighborhood that might need some assistance from us. So another good partnership that I think is working out well.
Can you say, Ray, how many people they identified? There were like 76 visits. Do you have a rough idea of how many people they identified of those 76?
I don't know if, Gene, if you guys have, I know that Ann was going to be tracking that as part of the grant, if she has that available yet, or if that's something you could get back to the mayor on. I know there was an evaluation when they come in so that we could track that number. So, Gene, is that something you have, or you need to get back to her?
Yeah, I'll have to get that number. I just pulled out the total number of visits, and there are some that are coming more often. It's just
so those are 76 separate visits, but it may be repeat visits.
Correct.
Same
right.
people. Okay, thank you.
I'll repeat this in a couple of our budgets, but really a lot of our goals, even though we have some listed in each budget, our goal for the department is to figure out ways to get our facilities and our programs open in a safe, responsible manner for the community again. We've been continually trying to do that this year, and I think that's going to be a goal, a big one for the senior center as we continue to see those numbers escalate and want to make sure that everybody's safe. Any other questions for Gene on either of those? If not, we're going to go into the Riverside Cemetery budget, and that's on page 182. This budget is, it's a pretty static budget as you look at it. I looked at it, it's about a 1.9% increase over last year. The tax levy support remains the same. And I think there's just a couple items Bill wanted to touch on here.
Yes, I think one of the biggest things that we've been doing there is trying to get people on site and familiar with the site that will actually help us market sales better. And so one of the programs that we initiated a couple years ago was a cemetery tour program. Currently, the Oshkosh Public Museum operates a tour program, but we've also been doing one in-house that's historical in nature as well. So it's been kind of a nice thing to get people at the cemetery in a situation where they can get familiar with the property, and also allow them to understand that we do have spaces available, so that hopefully they'll return at some point and purchase some spaces. So I think it's been a good thing to do as outreach. It has assisted us, we believe, in marketing more available spaces. So it's really one of our assets in the city as a member of the National Historic Registry. So we like to make sure that people appreciate the site and its assets there. So that's the big thing I wanted to add. I think we've seen kind of a level sales here for the most part, and I think it's a nice site that we encourage everybody to visit and enjoy.
One of the other things I would point out is the levy support for this has remained pretty static over the last couple of years, and I would give Bill and Ray credit for identifying the perpetual care fund that we hadn't been using to perpetually care for a lot of our the cemetery markers and the landscaping there. So you'll see that that's the last line item in the revenue line, transfer from other funds. We don't take any more than is available because we don't want to draw down the principal, but we are taking some earnings from there and using it to offset cemetery costs to provide some relief to the general taxpayer.
Any other questions? If not, we're going to move on. The next one is Parks Revenue Facilities, and that's page 188. And this budget, again, if you're new, it might be a complex one. For us, it's complex because there's a number of areas that are accounted for in this budget. So when you take a look at it, you're going to see that the budget for the zoo, the boat launches, the amusement rides and concessions, the Millers Bay Mooring Program, the REITs concession stand, zoo special events, Lakefly Cafe, and then Lakeshore Park was recently transferred into this fund within the last 2 years, I believe, as well. So something new that's in your packet. City Finance Director Van Gompel was able to utilize Munis and come up with the document on page 190, which is really a summary or a snapshot of all those areas. There's a lot of budget detail for each of those areas in the following pages, but it's really summarized real nicely in that one area. So I think that's been a nice addition for the budget document. There's a number of accomplishments here, and again, it's a lot of projects that were possibly affected by weather or COVID or whatever reasons out there. But I wanted to highlight some of those. The first one is we completed the construction of the Eagle exhibit at the zoo. And what we are looking to do is to introduce our new Eagle to the exhibit this year yet. Chad has been working closely with different rehabilitation sites that we can get a non-releasable bird from. And we waited till this time. We had to have obviously the exhibit done and have a permit in hand. But it's also a time for us to introduce the bird when it's not as busy, when there's less public people around. And so we don't want to startle the bird. And it gives our staff a chance to get to know what the needs are of the bird, its diet and everything else. So we're excited to get that exhibit up and running. And if you recall, that was all constructed with donations, and a number of those donations came from the Zoological Society, Tom and Penny Herrenberg, the Altrusa Club, and then the Community Foundation Board, as well as the Jim Ryan Fund over at the Community Foundation. And there's others that, gave us some dollar amounts as well. But again, it's a project that was completely from fundraising and so forth. I think the next one that has been really exciting for us is the electronic pay stations at the boat launches. We started out with installing 4 of those in, I believe, middle of July. We wanted to give those a chance for us to get used to, as well as the public to get used to those. We found they were very user-friendly, very good for our department, as well as for the finance department. It's allowed us to accept credit card and debit cards. And we've been keeping track of what's nice is the software program for these electronic base stations. We can pull up on our computers in our office and see live time. So we can see how many times this morning somebody went to Rainbow and used a credit card or paid cash. It's just real-time accurate information for us. What we saw within the first month probably is there was about 37 to 39% people using debit or credit cards. We're seeing that number keep creeping closer to 50. And that's good for us because it's not money we have to handle, not money our boat rangers have to handle and possibly put them in any kind of danger. But it's also when we take those deposit boxes to the finance department at City Hall, there's a lot less cash that then requires their accounting staff to go through and count. So it's more paperless, safer, and it's convenient for the users as well. So after the first couple of months and having success, we went ahead and purchased the other 4. And all of our boat launches at this time are equipped with the electronic base stations. They're solar operated. We had a DNR grant that paid 50% of the cost for those purchases. So I think it's really something that we've been excited to have, and I think the community's been excited to see as well. In part of the 2021 budget, similar to the park shelters, the Advisory Parks Board in August unanimously recommended some boat launch fee increases. The last time these were increased was 2014. We're looking to the daily launch will go from $5 to $7. That's consistent with Winnebago County. I believe Winnebago County has been at $7 for the past 2 summers at least. And then the annual and multi-year passes, those will go up $5 across the board. So you'll see that there's some additional revenue that we expect, but we also expect additional revenue just having those electronic pay stations because there's less opportunity for people to get around not paying, let's say. So it's going to be true to who's actually using the boat launch. Special events, Jenny's on here, and Jenny thrives on the special events throughout the year, whether it's the Leech, the zoo, rides area and so forth, and at the pool. Unfortunately, due to COVID, obviously, we canceled nearly all of those. During the zoo season, we did have our education coordinator providing some small programs for people that of groups of 10 or less. But hopefully you saw over the weekend the truck or treat event that Jenny did coordinate and offer, and I think it was pretty successful. We were unsure how that was going to work out. For the most part, we're seeing positive comments from the community. We learned from every program and every event, and we do have some. It was a long line, but even the people that stayed in line long were hearing it was still a nice event to have. So that was one event, and again, we're going to slowly start to see those come back. And I heard you talk, I think, with Chief Stanley as far as his budget for special event costs. We've been pretty conservative, knowing that even when we start back up at the Leech or the zoo special events, those are going to come back slowly, and that's what we're expecting. So again, it's just you're going to see those special events coming back from our department as well, but it's going to be when it's safe and appropriate. What Jenny was able to help us with, because we didn't have the events, she altered her schedule and actually was doing more managing on site for the zoo and for those amusement and ride areas. We were able to flex with her on her time where she'd come in for the evening for about 4 or 5 hours, cover that management position during the evening so we didn't have to hire a manager for those hours. And then she was on site to do the bank deposits and other things such as that. She also was the one doing the scheduling of all of our front gate monitors and attendees, and she was filling in there as well. So it kind of gives you an idea on the special event side of things. As far as the zoo, we did open the zoo, I believe it was June 6th, a little bit later than we normally would, and we ran through the end of September. We did stay with our 50 people maximum inside the facility. And I think other than after that first or second weekend with having some people in line, people were very understanding. The attendance was still good. We took a look at, it's roughly just over $17,000 or 17,000 people in the month of June, July, and August. And then in September, we had about another 10,000. So for the shortened season, we had over 62,000 people come through the zoo. And I think, and Jenny, you can jump in on this, but I think you guys were hearing a lot of, we just are glad that something's open and that we're able to come and visit the zoo.
Say, Ray, just a quick question on that 50 max. Just out of curiosity, so when we calculated, or when staff calculated the maximum occupancy for the Leech for a special event, I think it was what, 750 people? How does that compare to the 50 for the zoo?
Well, we did, when we set the 50, it was more of us looking at that time, the state and the county not wanting to have groups higher than 50. And even though the zoo might be a certain acreage, you got to remember there's a pond that takes up a good portion of that acreage. The exhibits take up a good portion, so that it really cuts down on that area that's open and available for the participants. So that's one thing we talked about when we opened. We said, let's start at 50, see how it goes. And with Jenny being down there, she was able to keep an eye on how are people handling the 50. Are we having larger groups that are gathering near exhibits? If we do, we're going to have staff reminding them to keep their social distancing. And so Jenny throughout the season was keeping an eye on that. And there were a number of times where she said, we really we gotta keep it at 50 because people are still congregating by the elk or by the otters. So it was really based on the group size at the time. And I think we stood by it because we weren't getting a lot of negative feedback regarding it. I think people understood that. Jenny, do you have anything you want to jump in on?
Yeah, just with that, the zoo can go both ways, but when people come in, they just always want to go to the right, and even though we would encourage them to go to the left to kind of keep people spread out, if the otters are out, everybody wants to be right there by the otters. And if it happens to be that the wolves are in sight, they're all right there. So no matter how hard we tried to keep people kind of spread out, it was really tough to do because once an animal is visible, they all want to be there. So, on the weekends, we'd have a wait, and it really wasn't more than like a half-hour wait, and people were very thankful that they could just come and they could bring the kids down, even if they did have to wait a little bit. Most weekdays were okay, unless we had like a little, childcare or some type of group come in, and people were always really willing to wait. And we reminded people, if they were buying concessions, they could use that outside window by the playground, so they weren't standing waiting and counting there. And a couple times we had to remind a couple of people that kind of, stayed in the concessionary for a really long time that, if they were done, they could leave. And, so people were super understanding and just really happy that we could actually be open and they could come visit.
Thanks for that. And then, Ray, I don't know if this was necessarily under revenue. There was a question from folks about whether or not the ice skating rink. I don't think that was under this section though. Whether or not that was going to happen again this year.
Which ice skating rink? The one that was down at Riverside Park or like a convention center? Or
yes.
Okay, we're actually and Chad's been working closer on some of this too, but we've had some recent inquiries by individuals that are helping Leon Thompson with Celebration of Lights, looking for things that we can maybe do down at Menomonee Park to enhance that activity. So I was contacted by Carlene at the foundation saying, hey, is it possible to have that rink at Menomonee Park, have it so that we decorate some trees around it? So that's something that Chad has been looking at right now. We need to have a level surface in order to install it. We need to have a water source and certain things. So we're looking at that. So right now it's up in the air where that's going to end up. And obviously it's weather dependent, but we have been, and Chad, you can speak to this, the Millers Bay ice rink, I believe you've been doing for a number of years, and you're going to continue that as well.
Yep, that'll be continued through the winter when ice conditions permit us to maintain with equipment.
So we're looking at some different options for ice rinks, but the one at Millers Bay, like Chad said, will go. The portable one, if you want to call it that, to be determined based on location that we can find.
So that's not revenue though. That's a free one in terms of for the public. But where's the expense of that in here?
We don't, it's not an expense we have. Basically, our staff erects the rink, and then we'll go down and we'll put a new sheet of ice on. We'll flood it occasionally, but that's through, it's all paid through the community foundation. There's a separate, it's a donor fund that was set up there. So they pay any expenses out of there.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Chad, with all the stuff on the Eagle exhibit or anything else that revenue facilities, you want to touch on anything that I forgot or?
I'm just saying probably another highlight down there, but I know it was through, you know, community development and all that stuff with the Lakeshore Trail construction, all that stuff, and the items that are happening on the Lakeshore that come out of this budget area is a big part with the long run. I know you highlighted that earlier, Ray, with the phase 1 developments of Lakeshore and all that, but those things do encompass this in the 435 account too. So as far as other highlights on there, I think you hit them all pretty well from there. So
I'm sorry, Chad, did you say the 11435 account? So I see that that's in, why would that be a revenue for Lakeshore?
I can help with that one. That's that was one, if you recall, in last year's budget. We moved Lakeshore from a golf course budget into this budget. And what the city manager and the finance director had discussed with the council last year was we're going to incrementally put some tax dollars into that operation to get it up to fully funding those expenditures in a couple of years. I think it helped us with expenditure restraint. It helps us keep some of those dollars out of the general fund budget and try to continually increase some of the tax levy to support the operation at Lakeshore Park.
Yeah, Russ, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but it was primarily put here for an expenditure restraint, a defense.
And as long as, I'm sorry, Russ, did you want to jump in or is that good?
No, I think that's pretty much accurate. It's basically a transfer in. We don't show it as levy dollars per se. We just transferred it from the general fund into 255 to cover those expenses.
So it's a transfer similar to what you do at the senior center, correct?
A little bit different, but kind of the same thing.
Okay. I did want to make note, as long as Russ is on there, if you take a look at page 188, you're going to see a large fund balance, over $2 million. What we need to do is work on getting the proceeds from the golf course sale transferred out of here into the CIP where those expenses are going to be charged to. So that's something internally we'll be working through, but right now it's still budgeted here in the 255. If there's nothing else, we're going to move on to the Leech Amphitheater, which is page 196. As you probably are aware, the Leech was a pretty quiet venue this year, and the tax levy continues to be, we're holding it at the $14,000. It's been at that 14,000 for a number of years. It did allow us to do some projects down there while it wasn't busy. Obviously, there was some concrete work that we had to take care of repairing, and then we worked with Scooter in the electric division to do some light bollard installation and replacement there. So that's a big chunk of the cost due to those projects that we were able to get completed. Again, here although we list some goals as far as some of the hardscapes and so forth, really our goal here is to start getting events back down there, whether it's our events through Waterfest, weddings. So that's really going to be our focus again, is trying to make sure we're working with everybody in the community to do that in a safe and responsible manner. And, again, Jenny will be planning for her Tuesday night concerts. Again, we're looking at a pretty conservative number, just knowing people are going to be a little cautious coming out at the start, but hopefully we're at a better point as we get into June and July next year. So it's a pretty static budget, not a lot to talk about. If there's nothing, we can move on to the Pollock Pool, and that's on page 201. And just like the Leech, this was even a quieter place this year, except for some of the work that we were taking care of And as the council's aware, back in early summer, I provided a memo that we did still have to fill the pool and operate pumps and do certain things. And we had to do that to make sure that, those pumps weren't sitting for a year and seizing up. We had to make sure that there was water in the pool, so there were no issues with the pool walls and letting the sun beat on it. So there are operating costs, and as you can see, there's operating costs to the tune of about $70,000 roughly. The tax levy support for the pool has remained consistent at about $64,000. So we are going to be tapping into just a little bit into the fund balance, but it's coming out fairly close to where we had expected as far as the brief operations that we had going on there. We are already starting to work with the recreation department. As you can probably be aware, not having the pool open for a year, we don't have that stock of returning lifeguards that we normally can depend on. So we've been meeting with the new recreation director, Cable, and his staff, talking about ways that we can start gearing up to make sure that we're getting enough staff in for next year. We are planning that we may have to have limited numbers as far as capacity goes, if that's the case due to COVID. And we've got a number of good contacts between myself, Jenny, and Chad with other agencies throughout the state. Some of those did open this year with very limited capacities or just running swim lessons. So I think through us and our colleagues, we'll be able to come up with some ideas on how we can safely open. Or if things, and there's a vaccine and things are going better, back to normal operations. Again, not really a lot here. It's limited funding from the levy support, and a lot of it comes from the admissions revenue, as well as some funding from the Community Foundation endowment, a little bit from the school district for the support of the pool.
Ray, Mike has a question. Mike Ford.
Yeah, you may have just answered it, but you have a pretty impressive amount of gifts and donations. Is that from the Community Foundation? Is that what you're referring to?
That's correct. We have a maintenance endowment at the Community Foundation, and we've been cautious on how we've tapped that as well in the future. But the last year and a half, we had a major water leak that we discovered partway through the season. So the utilities were getting up on us, and we had some repairs. We actually have some repairs that we're continuing there that we discovered over the summer when we were just doing our limited operation. So yes, we do tap into that endowment, and that's a big chunk of that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Ray, this may not be a fair question for you, but between yesterday and today, we've obviously been hearing from folks that, we've got a number of empty-ish buildings and, reduced programming or alternate programming. But so many of the budget assumptions projecting for next year are assuming returning to basically 2018 levels. Like I said, it may not be a fair question because we haven't been asking that of the other departments, but as you think about alternative programming and uses, what's plan B if it doesn't return to normal or 2018, if it's a new normal that doesn't reflect return of special events and the gatherings?
Are you talking specifically for the pool or generally?
Generally.
Well, those are, as we look at each of the areas, like I said, with the pool, we're working on plan B and C. We're already thinking if we can only have 200 people in here per hour or per time session, we might have to look at doing that. And my hope is that we're going to be back to where we can allow a larger group in there, but there may be, it might be 25% of our capacity. So we need to plan for those. Our budget that we did put out, again, even though it looks like it might be 2018 comparison, I think we're still conservative, not only here, but throughout the Leech and other areas. I think with Jenny's, the Leech concerts, we estimated spending less in concessions. We estimated bringing in less in concessions, knowing it's going to be a slow ramp up. And for those programs, especially in our area, because we have so many special funds, it's not going to hurt the tax levy as much, because if our attendance is good and our revenue comes in and our concessions are good, we're holding our budget real well, whether it's, on the high side or low side, we're offsetting those costs the best we can. So to answer your question, I think it really depends on the area. The senior center, we've been doing that for the last 7 months now, is we've had plan A, B, C, D. Can we put this information out to the community? Or, even though Jean put information in her newsletter, a week later, the number skyrocketed. So we had to back off our plans again. So our new norm may be this for the next year, doing the plan A, B, and C.
And I guess with the announcement yesterday of the bankruptcy for, I believe it was Rock USA, or was it Rock and Country USA? Just, a couple of the larger events, a couple of departments have talked about, anticipation of return next year of those special event levels. But, if that's any kind of indicator of the dominoes or the domino effect, just, concerned about putting too much weight into those assumptions of return to 2018 levels.
Yeah, one of the things I would point out, Ray and I talked about this very early on, and the pool is probably the best example of that. Even though there was no activity at the pool, the subsidy that we provide is more than just for its base operations. We help fund a portion of the costs of operating the pool. So we didn't lose money at Pollock, or at least not that much, because most of it is the subsidy covers more than necessary. When we have a bad season, when I say a bad season as opposed to no season, then it's a little tougher because we have the overhead and very little revenue. We had very little revenue, but we also had very little expenses. And all these programs, and I think Jenny is a master at it because Jenny's been doing the revenue programs for a number of years now. She has to balance each and every one of those programs. And so we have to prepare every season based on what we think will happen and what could happen. And in this case, this was kind of a worst case scenario, but I think we would have been worse off having a partial season from a financial standpoint, because if you have to staff up for expected 90-degree days and then you get 60-degree days, you have people there and you're spending a little money. Here, we spent nothing. We never had to call anybody in. We never had to send anybody home. So those things actually made it easier. The tougher question will be if we open mid-season, because is Ray going to be able to attract a generation of lifeguards that has been missing out on swim lessons for a year and a half? It's that little logistical thing that I think you and I take for granted that Ray and his folks live with all the time. And that concern about losing that generation of swimmers / lifeguards, those are the types of things that we're going to struggle with, because those generations come and they go, and we may have lost a mini generation of lifeguards.
And I'll add to that point too, not having the school districts operating and having the kids able to take swim programs or using the pool, the YMCA having limited use and possibly limited lifeguard staff and lifeguard classes. All those things affect our outdoor pool as well. So the final one is going to be on page 218. It's our Street Tree Memorial Fund. And it's really an in and out fund for Bill. This is a fund where we put the DNR grants that we receive along with the expenditures. And then this is also where the donations for the Memorial Tree Program and those expenditures come out of. I'm sorry, Bill, before when you were talking about the Memorial Tree Program, did you have any numbers that you shared? I don't recall.
I did. This year, as of this morning, we had $10,000 of revenue come into the Memorial Tree Fund specific to the program. We also have, as Ray mentioned, in and out activity related to some of the grants, because we have grant money coming in, and then plus we have to pay for materials and that through the fund. So this has been a good way to do it for us. So it's been successful in a number of purposes. So I think ultimately we've been doing quite a bit of very good business throughout this fund.
So of that 10,000, just real quickly, it's about $400 a tree. So about 25 trees were planted.
Exactly.
In public spaces based on donations.
Right. Yeah, we had 25 trees ordered up to today, and I think the guys are just finishing up installation of our fall cycle here today, and then so we expect we'll probably have a few more come in here yet that will actually do the planting in the spring. So it's been a pretty lucrative fund over the years. We've had actually former Oshkosh residents nationwide contribute to it. So a few years ago, we went coast to coast. We had people from California purchasing trees for our parks, as well as New York City. This year, we had some from Texas. So it's kind of cool to see some of those individuals, thinking of our Oshkosh parks and contributing to their beautification.
Yeah, and I know we had, it's not in this fund, but we've seen an increase in the number of donations for our Memorial Bench program this year as well. And as soon as the South Park Lagoon project was completed, Chad was getting phone calls from people wanting to donate for benches around those areas. So a lot of those benches, to be honest, we don't budget anything in our operations budget for benches. Just about everything you see is either related to a playground project expense or it's a donation coming in from our Memorial Bench program.
Any more on the operating side?
That's it. Operating side, it's CIP. I already talked about Lakeshore and the progress we're on that. I think I'll quickly touch on the Parks Administration Operations Building. If you take a look at page 404, as we talked about earlier, under the parks improvements, the 325 parks new building construction, what we're able to do is take a look at some of the feelings that we're getting after the CIP meetings. And knowing the council's feeling towards keeping the borrowing down, worked with Russ and Mark to say, how can we possibly fund this? Let's get it done, but spread it out over 3 years as possible. So we had some discussion with, we've been working with Cooney Architects, at least on some of the preliminary design and numbers. And they were comfortable saying if we had a project and we had to do it this way, it's very feasible. Because if we were looking at the CIP getting approved here in November, if this project were approved as is, we'd start design moving forward, the first part of the year. Probably going to take us at least 10 months before we get through design process, all the city approval process. So by the time getting close to the end of 21, there'd be some property acquisition going on, possibly just some start of the initial construction in 21, but a bulk of it happening then in 22 and some finalizing of it in 23. So that's kind of how we looked at it. And again, talking with the consultant, they felt that it's a project that, or basing it this way, the project would be completed on schedule.
Ray or Mark, just kind of talking about that spread out over, several years. Mark, you mentioned that, next year is when we could see a pretty challenging year and going into 2022. How do you feel about that? I guess that continued discussion of spreading this out over several years with that expectation.
I would separate the capital program from the operating budget. The capital program are obligations we're going to pick up for the next 10 to 20 years, depending on the length of borrowing. I think in this case, Russ, I'll put you on the spot. I assume that the borrowing for the Parks Administration building would be a 20-year borrowing. Would that be correct?
Yeah.
So yeah, the impact on the operating budget wouldn't be there. It would really be on the capital budget. And, you know, as we've talked about, as we've gone through the exercise of debt management, you know, I think one of the more, you know, good activities that the council was able to do was be able to sit down with Russ and go through that spreadsheet and just, you know, everybody could say, well, change this assumption, change that assumption. The concern that we'll probably see is that our percentage on debt will not drop as much as it has in the last few years. It'll probably be more like it was in 14, 15, and 16, where the drop in the percentage was because of council holding the line on the borrowing, not that the value is necessarily going to increase as much. The likelihood of some of the values increasing just aren't there, especially on the commercial side. I think you're going to see people come in, but the residential side is very strong. So remember, our debt is based on our equalized value, not our assessed value. So I don't anticipate it'll be a problem on the capital side in 22.
So Mark, some additional comments on that real quick, if I may. Just a reminder for council on the CIP, the projects are listed in two different forms. And I would call your attention if you wanted to move forward to page 387 and 388. The first part of our CIP is projects by funding source. And one of the things that concerns the city manager and myself is the amount of borrowing we have identified right now for 2023. And I guess as finance director, I would urge you that if we're going down this path and we're going to start working on the parks administration and operations building, that pretty much kind of says we're committed to this 3-year plan. But we have to really identify then what are some of the other potential borrowing projects that we're willing to take on in the year 2022. And I think that the list we have given you on page 387, 388 continues on 389, that we would have to trim back some of the other potential projects in the calendar year 2022, because I don't think we can fund all of those requests right now. And I think that's going to be your biggest debate moving forward with the CIP.
And our goal will be to follow council's direction on what you want our borrowing cap to be. But as I mentioned yesterday, we're going to have our work cut out for us. And I think I may have referred to 2022 yesterday, but it's really 2022 and 2023. But once we make a commitment with the parks building, you know, once we put a shovel in the ground, I mean, we can get the architects to do something, and you could put that on the shelf, so to speak. But once you put a shovel into the ground, you are committing for the whole thing. And what that means more than likely is, you know, we'll do the parks building, but we have to recognize that other things that haven't begun yet are going to be deferred. And, you know, all you got to do is take a look at those pages from 387 all the way from pages 387 to 391. And there's just a slew of projects that are on there that are going to have to get pushed back one way or the other. I see South Main reconstruction. I see more Riverwalk. Those challenges, you know, we can't do all of those. You start by cutting the big ones, because the big ones are the only ones that the only way we're going to get down from 26 million down to 14.5 million. We got to cut the big ones. Cutting $100,000 project isn't going to help you. You're going to have to cut the $1 and $2 and $3 million projects, or at least defer them. And I think that's really, I'm just putting up some specifics to what Russ has indicated. And pushing that back is going to be a challenge.
Thanks for pointing that out, Russ and Mark.
Sobering, but we got to do it.
That concludes our budget all the way through the CIP. So I wanted to thank everybody for letting us take some time and explain things, and always know that if questions come up, you know how to reach me, and I can get the answers, whether it's through one of the division managers or wherever else. So feel free to contact me.
Actually, before you go, Ray, I just got a couple quick comments. One, just since we were just talking about the CIP part of it, I know that originally presented Mark and Russ probably preferred the 2-year financing mechanism. I'm appreciative that you guys all took a look at it, tried to figure out another way for us to spread that just a little bit farther so we could say yes to it, yet still meet council's directive of maintaining that limit on borrowing and still trying to get some projects done. I know Mark and Russ, I think, have been talking about council giving direction on setting aside X amount of dollars to start working on those facility projects, and letting Mark and staff figure out what's best then to fill in. So I'm supportive of doing that in the future as well when we start talking about the next budgets. But really, just a thank you. I've sent it to most of the especially the quality of life asset departments, Jenny and Jean and Ray, everybody you got. I'm appreciative of everything you guys have done over the last 6 to 8 months, really, in terms of trying to keep your facilities open, trying to keep them accessible safely, and getting really creative and just adapting well to what's been going on. So whether it was trunk or treat, or just the senior services and doing the outdoor activities and the outdoor exercises, really appreciative of trying to keep the facilities accessible to those that really need them most. And so just really, really thankful for that. Pollock Pool, I know Ray and you and I talked earlier in the year about that one. I think a few council members reached out to you about concerns on that one. For having a facility like that sitting empty for a year can be devastating to the infrastructure. I'm really thankful that how the budget came in, that it was just supported with those dollars that Levy gave it. So all in all, a decent year. I know we talked about facilities too, the parks and things like that, and just trying to make everything accessible as much as safely possible. We can all debate what safely is, but you guys are doing a great job. So thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, Chief Smith is standing by, so I think we can go to a break at your discretion. Regarding the other CIPs, obviously, that's a big issue. Part of the November 4th workshop would be to do any cleanup issues with the CIP as well, especially to the degree you start thinking about a little more if you've got any other questions or concerns. The purpose of that workshop is to do some cleanup, whether it happens on your own, looking at things, you hear things at the public hearing, or influenced by anything you've heard over the last 2 days. So that's the purpose of that. We can maybe talk a little bit about that at the end after the chief's done. But if it pleases you, it's 2:23. Maybe we get back at 2:40. I think Chief Smith is standing by, and I think he told me he was ready to go when council's ready to go.
Does that work for everybody on council?
2:40.
All right, so 2:40.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ray.
Thanks,
Jean.
Ray. Thanks,
Jenny,
Jean.
Chad, Bill.
Chad.
Thank you.
Thanks.
If you want to check your mic quick.
Hello.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
you can always tell it's late afternoon when it's only the subject department head, the council, and and the finance director, city manager. Thanks for joining us, Fitz. That's but everybody else, it's a lot less crowded a screen than it was this morning. So, but it looks like Dean's ready. He's in his nice uniform and everything, so he's ready to go.
And I also have pants on.
There you go. Let's see.
That's always a plus.
As Jake points out, we're still live on the air with audio. So if for people listening at home, if you were listening this morning, you saw a lot more crowded screen. So Councilmember Allison Osby indicated she had to address a personal issue, so she's not going to be here the rest of the day. And who else are we? Jake's in there. So 1, 2. Yeah, we got everybody else. So we're ready to go, Madam Mayor, when you are.
Is Bob and Mike back?
Yes.
Okay.
They just didn't do video yet.
They're signed in, but they don't have their video on. So we're live, and we'll go ahead and give them another minute here to sign on. We said 2:40, so we'll just give them a minute.
Again, Chief, just a reminder to point to pages if you're referring to something, even though most of yours is with your base departmental budget, but anything else comes up. Fitz and Michelle already did PFC, so you don't need to worry about that one.
I see Mike. Mike just popped on. Not sure about Bob yet, but we can go ahead and get started.
All right.
Chief.
Good afternoon, and it's a great couple of 2 days. I'm sure you folks have had a nice, pleasurable 8 hours worth of listening to all that. So thank you for the opportunity to meet with you to discuss the police department's proposed operating budget for 2021. I'd like to highlight some of the initiatives that we've accomplished or are working on here in 2020. Team policing continues to be our overarching model in serving our community. One of our challenges is ensuring our new officers and staff continue with this philosophy. In the last nearly 5 years, 43% of our patrol officers are new to the force. Excuse me. 31% of our total staff are new to the department. With the influx of our new officers, we have to ensure that our new staff have the same motivation to serve under this philosophy. Now, a real example of the team policing effort exists in the work that the department has done for the residents at 1105 Jefferson, or near 1105 Jefferson. Neighborhood officers, as well as members of criminal investigations, have worked tirelessly with the concerned citizens to monitor this location while the city navigates potential solutions. This is labor intensive, but the results are obvious. The residents of the area understand the effort that the department's been putting forth. Thus, the city has shown it cares about their concerns. Although we are not able as a department to change this location, we have been able to provide some peace for these residents, knowing that officers daily are working in that area. The police department in 2016 implemented our body camera program. With this implementation, we outfitted all of our patrol officers, as well as all of our school resource officers with body cameras.
Excuse me, Dean?
Yeah.
Your microphone sounds a little distant.
Sounds underwater a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit, just to let you know.
See if I can turn it up a little bit. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah. Everybody else is tracking me, right? It's so.
Can we hear me now?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to shout at my computer. So in 2016, the police department implemented our body camera program. With this implementation, we outfitted all of our patrol officers, as well as all of our school resource officers with body cameras. This was a good beginning, leading us to a new level of transparency in our actions as a professional law enforcement agency. During the last 5 years, we have accumulated nearly 28 terabytes of video that we have stored for court, training, or other legal requirements. This number will only continue to grow. I will tell you that I'm very happy with our program and the level of accountability this provides related to the work of our officers. Our police officers have embraced this technology, and it has provided real observable evidence for both prosecution and trials, as well as complaints against police officers, allowing us to either prove or disprove an allegation against an officer. More times than not, the use of the cameras have shed a different light on the complaints received against our officers than what was originally alleged. We certainly have been paying attention to the dialogue across the country related to the law enforcement profession. In response to this, you will have noticed that we have included in our base budget a provision to enhance our body camera program by adding more cameras for our street supervisors as well as our detectives. This will provide even more coverage of cameras on the street. We also are in a contract renewal stage where our current contract expires next year. Our data usage, licenses, and expansion were evaluated. We also identified areas that we could save on some costs related to personnel. And with this, are able to expand our body camera program, replace all of our equipment for our expiring contract, expand our storage and licenses for an increase of only $37,000. In addition to the expansion of cameras, we have continued identifying training opportunities to enhance our officers and staff cultural awareness of our community. We've already completed one-on-one training with all staff, both sworn and non-sworn, on awareness of minority perceptions here in the city of Oshkosh. We have reviewed our policies and continue to train our officers on use of force, de-escalation techniques, crisis intervention, as well as bias-based policing. We have received generous donations from our community to help fund our crisis intervention training. I believe it's important to highlight the importance of this training that we provide to our officers. Within the last 2 years, we've had numerous occasions where our officers have been able to use their crisis intervention training as well as their de-escalation training to bring situations to a safe resolution. One incident of note for you: one of our officers spent several hours simply talking the person down from crisis. This person was standing in the driveway with a gun to his head. He also stood with him and was able to talk him away from his crisis. This occurred even as the individual was telling the officer to shoot him. We safely helped this person get the help that he needed. Another incident just occurred recently where we had a homicide that occurred last month. In this situation, we had a homicide suspect barricaded in a residence. We spent nearly 12 hours working to safely take him into custody through de-escalation. Many hours of conversation and crisis intervention. Another step we've taken is we've reviewed our psychological screening with our department psychologist to ensure that we are screening for any bias in a prospective candidate during the recruiting process. We are also continuing to train our officers on fair and impartial policing. We have adjusted our website to make it easier for persons who have a complaint against an officer to readily learn the process for filing a complaint. As some of you are aware, 2 years ago, we introduced IA Pro, which helps us manage our internal investigations, but more importantly, provides us with a technology enhancement to manage our early intervention system to help identify officers who may be developing issues in their work that we may need to address. We must continue to recruit qualified officers in order to maintain our service level here in the city. Part of this recruitment is focused on our minority applicants. In the third quarter of 2020, our minority applicant pool increased to 16% of total applicants. At the beginning of the hiring process, we are starting to see more minority applicants. However, we still must attract qualified applicants across the dimensions of our community. As it relates to recruiting and retention, as well as having officers who are empathetic and culturally sensitive to the needs of our community, we must ensure that we provide additional education opportunities for our staff. A recent article published by Dr. Christopher McFarland of the American Military University emphasized that some of the impediments to increasing the professionalism in law enforcement is related to the level of education of police officers who work the streets, work the streets and engage our community. Dr. McFarland stated that obstacles and impediments aside, expert observers and research suggest that higher education is essential for an individual who wishes to become a competent, well-rounded officer in today's complex and diverse society. Requiring higher education for officers will contribute to the professionalism of policing. He went on to state that research over the last 10 to 12 years has also demonstrated the correlation between higher education and an avoidance of situations that have recently brought so much public criticism of policing, such as use of force, miscommunication, and accountability. He further stated that other studies found that college-educated police officers have better ethics and communication skills. Most notable was a 2014 study that showed that college-educated officers are better prepared for the rigors of the chosen career because higher education strengthens individuals' notions of accountability, preparedness, and responsibility, as well as strengthening their interpersonal skills. I share all this to ask that you as well consider additional funding for college reimbursement for all public safety to help us with not only retaining high-performing officers, but also give us an additional incentive to attract high-performing persons to the professional law enforcement here in Oshkosh. Last year, we began to roll out the Relay app. Many of you are aware of it. With the Relay app, citizens are able to be more engaged as it relates to calls for service in their neighborhoods. This app allows citizens to communicate directly with their district officers and also provide almost real-time data and pictures of an ongoing incident that officers may be responding to. It allows officers to communicate clearly with citizens. Currently, we have around 1,300 registrants on the app, and we're seeing it growing as we promote it. The Bison Narcotics Unit has seen success in combating narcotics trafficking here in Oshkosh. This is the 4th year that it has been in existence, and the success is apparent. Although COVID, like everything else, has impacted everything that we do. Earlier this year, we had to reduce our narcotics proactive investigations due to COVID. Our drug investigations have decreased over the same period of last year. We have now begun ramping this back up. We do know that our users are now driving down to the Milwaukee area to make purchases of narcotics. They are then traveling back to Oshkosh with the purchases. We have been fortunate that our community has helped us with funding through donations for several pieces of equipment that has helped us in our drug investigations. What is very concerning to us is that after seeing a decline in drug overdoses in 2018, we're now seeing a second year of increases in drug overdoses. As an example, during the month of September of 2019, for that month alone, we had 3 overdoses in the city. That could be attributed to heroin. During this period, during the month of September of 2020, we've had 5 drug overdoses attributed to heroin. That's a 66% increase. This in turn has increased our deaths related to overdoses. This is partly attributed to the use of fentanyl and illegal drugs. We're also seeing an increase in the use of cocaine as well as methamphetamine. This, laced with fentanyl, is a deadly combination. Put all this into context, year to date, September of 2019, we had a total of 20 drug overdoses in the city. As of September of 2020, we've had 61 overdoses here in the city. That's a 205% increase in drug overdoses. In addition, as of September of 2019, we had 8 drug deaths related to overdoses. In 2020, we've had 12 deaths related to drug overdoses. This is alarming to us. As I'm sure that it is to you. Our officers are equipped with Narcan, along with the fire department. The police department's Narcan is also funded by donations. If we did not have Narcan, I believe our overdose deaths would be even greater. Along with the drug overdoses and drug overdose deaths, an emerging concern for me is the increase in certain areas of crime data. In September of 2020, we have seen an increase in various property offenses here in the city year to year from 2019. As an example, burglaries are up nearly 30%. Larcenies are up 20.6%. And motor vehicle thefts are up 18.6%. Cumulatively, our reported property offenses are up 13.2% from 2019. We must continue to be diligent in our efforts to combat those crimes that are most impactful upon our community. Another area of concern that we are seeing is an increase in gun seizures related to violent crime. Over the last 3 years, our highest year in gun seizures related to violent crime has been this year. Gun seizures related to violent crime is now at 56% of those incidents. We have seen a reduction in person offenses, which are down 9.7%, which is encouraging. Those are things such as robberies and larceny from a person and so forth. So we are encouraged by that. Some of you have heard me speak of this, but I need to share once again the success we're seeing in our accreditation. The Oshkosh Police Department is the only municipal law enforcement agency in the state of Wisconsin that is accredited at both the state and the national level. We have over 450 standards that we must maintain in order to be accredited. In 2018, CALEA, our national accreditation body, went to an annual review of standards, taking a quarter of the standards required and conducting the review. We were successful in 2018 and 2019 on our first 2 annual reviews, and are now going through our 3rd annual review, which will demonstrate compliance on 3/4 of our standards. We'll have our final quarter review of standards completed in 2021. This makes us a more professional police department, and I would argue one of the most professional departments in the state. We have been nationally accredited since 1994. We will also begin reaccreditation at the state level through the Wisconsin Law Enforcement Accreditation Group in 2021. Our K-9 unit continues to be a valuable asset to the department. In 2020, we trained a new team with Officer Roberto Martinez and K-9 Lando. They have become an incredible asset to the department. In 2019, our mental health and resiliency program for our officers, staff, and our families came to fruition. As a profession, police officers suffer far greater instances of PTSD than the majority of civilian-related jobs. Officer suicides across the country are on the rise. Discipline related to depressive behaviors increase when the personnel are not cared for. And of course, the families of our employees suffer. As a result of some issues that came to light in 2018, the department took a closer look at how we were caring for our officers. For this evaluation, we decided to initiate our mental health resiliency program. This effort begins at the management level. As a leader of the police department, I had to gain the trust of our staff that I cared for their well-being, that it was okay to ask for help. This year, COVID has added an additional strain to our family here at OPD. This year, we're conducting several virtual training sessions to help our officers and their families, addressing stress reduction, financial well-being, and taking care of their family. That's just to name a few of our topics for this year. However, the most important part of our program is our embedded counselor. We have brought in a professional counselor and have embedded her within the department. Officers and staff members have the freedom to speak with her with confidentiality, that the stressors that they are dealing with in their life do not become public knowledge. We have seen the results of our efforts bearing fruit. Officers are embracing the wellness efforts and are taking advantage of the training efforts as well as our counselors. I believe this is a high point in our department as we destigmatize the mental well-being of police personnel. At its inception, this was funded through generous donations of our community members. The city's strategic plan is important to us here in how we contribute to the success of the city. I'm sure that you've had your fill of COVID. However, COVID has had a direct impact on our activities. We are a very community-based police department, and not being able to be one-on-one, be face-to-face with our community members, that certainly impacts our ability to engage the community successfully. But to highlight several of our KPIs and the additional work that we have done related to the strategic plan, we've completed year-to-date 14 citizen, community, and neighborhood presentations and meetings, 5 school presentations related to various relevant topics for our youth, completed 9 step-up and youth mentor programs. We had 28 outreach events specific to our diverse population groups. We now have 57 officers trained in crisis intervention. We have participated in 8 crisis intervention team meetings. We have implemented traffic and safety plans in each of our 7 reporting districts. We've received from citizens 535 Crime Stopper tips, and of course, related to substance abuse, the community and you are aware of the work that our Bison Narcotics unit has completed. For the third quarter of this year, 16% of our applicant pool for police officers were minorities. This is the fourth year of our motorcycle unit and the final year of our first motorcycle lease. Our current motorcycle was delivered to us in May of this year. The cost to the department is only $3,000 a year, which provides a great tool for the city and an incredible savings. The unit has been successfully deployed from May through September to address transportation safety at various locations and specifically in roundabouts. The motorcycle unit has conducted 134 traffic stops, investigated 34 accidents, participated in 6 special events, and been deployed on shift 90 times. As a footnote, we'll be applying for a state grant related to pedestrian safety for next year to help us combat the numerous complaints at roundabouts. This year, we also initiated our drone team. This team is primarily used for surgery and for improved surveillance. Our original was donated, and we now have 4 licensed drone pilots with the department. We continue to use social media to tell the story of the police department. This has been a challenge this year to serve our citizens well. We believe we have taken some steps in place to moderate some of the concerns that have been presented to us. We know that we seldom have the media report on the good that we do, and we're trying to take steps ourselves to talk about the positive activities of the department. At the close of 2018, we had a total of 29,919 social media followers. As of October of 2019, we had 64,766 social media followers. Year to date in 2020, we have over 72,000 social media followers across all of our platforms. Now, our operating budget is generally a level request for non-personnel related costs. As a note, 95% of the police operating budget is personnel costs, not including fuel costs, which are covered in the public works operating budget. The only increases in our base budget are contractual obligations and the renewal and expansion of our body camera program. In addition, I would be remiss if I did not highlight that we have a $100,000 salary savings requirement that I will be working to provide in 2021 that is programmed into our proposed budget. This is drilling down deep into vacancies that we will be filling in 2021 and the time to recruit and hire new employees. This helps the city to provide a modest budget request. As an additional point of reference, the police department in a normal year responds to a conservative number of about 46,000 calls for service a year. This number does not account for the various requests from citizens regarding our neighborhood concerns, our programs that we participate in, and of course those calls that our officers receive that did not generate a traditional call for service. Moving on to additional requests and enhancements. Certainly, we support the fire department's request for tuition reimbursement. It should be for all departments as a benefit to assist us in recruiting and retention of officers and staff. We also received an additional enhancement request for the addition of 2 patrol officers. This would help us reduce our overtime spending and keep us on track with the recommendations of the staffing study that was completed in 2018. This will have a reduction in our shift shortage overtime. The staffing study was provided to council in January of 2019. After the analysis, it was recommended the department add 3 patrol officer positions to meet the staffing needs of the department. 1 position was added in 2019, with a recommendation to add another 2 over the next 5 years. We did not ask for, nor did we receive any addition to our sworn staff last year. The department is requesting to add 2 positions in 2021, which will bring us to our recommended staffing from the staffing study, and reduce the shift shortage over time the department has incurred due to staffing shortages. Current shift shortage overtime work for 2020 is 2,700 hours through October 15th of this year. The average of 300 hours per month for shift shortages is almost equivalent to 2 patrol officers. This is our second highest overtime category, second only to investigative overtime, which year to date is 3,400 hours. Using the current averages, the department could end the year with about 3,600 hours in shift shortages, a value of $190,000. If officers elect to have the hours earned, paid out versus being used as time off, total cost for the department would be about $227,000. Adding 2 patrol positions will provide a savings of approximately $49,000. Our sworn staffing is 1.5 officers per 1,000 residents. This is a simple calculation, but it's one of the lowest staffing numbers per 1,000 residents for police officers across the state. We're also one of the few departments in the state that engage our community through the team policing model, which serves our citizens well, but is very labor intensive. Being a proactive department versus being a reactive department. With that, are there any questions related to the police department's operating budget?
Chief, in the, where would we find the school liaison officers in here? I'm assuming on page 62.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Do we have the school liaison, school resource officers separated out, or are they under 6102?
They're in 6102. They're basically police officers. So on page 60, the officers are just listed as patrol officers. Wouldn't that be correct, Chief?
That's correct.
City Manager or Chief, can you remind us what portion the school district covers on those officers?
Sure. We currently have 5 school resource officers assigned to our schools, 2 at the high schools, and then the rest are at the middle schools, and they share elementary schools. The school district currently reimburses the city back 50% of 4 of our school resource officers, and the city picks up the remaining full rate for the 5th school resource officer. They also pick up any overtime associated with the school resource officers.
And they pay us for the 9 months of the school year. They don't, the 3 months that school's out, they don't pay us for those costs either, because they're back at the station doing general work.
That's correct.
Have there been any further discussions about their contribution level?
Once their business manager retired, those discussions have kind of slowed down a little bit. And with them working through the referendum, and also with COVID, we certainly did not bill them this past year for when we did not have police officers at the schools. We are all kind of on a weird footing right now, and we got to get back to where we were, hopefully, and we can begin those conversations again.
Thank you.
Actually, I've got a question along the same lines. Can you quantify a reason why Oshkosh Area School District is only paying 50% of 4, and that we're picking up full boat on the 5th? I completely I get the rest of the funding mechanism, only paying for 9 months, and those things, but fully on board. But wondering why they're not paying full boat on the 5th one as well, or paying their half share on the 5th one. Excuse me.
That was an arrangement that was made prior to me coming here, where we provided 5 resource officers. We began discussions about that 5th funding. Again, they had a retirement, and getting the school district to fully support that has been a bit of a challenge for us. But it also puts me in a difficult position. I can't pull a school resource officer away. It just makes for a difficult time. We need more of an equal agreement, if you will, on the funding sources. I will tell you that when the school resource officers are in the schools, they handle essentially every call for service that a normal patrol officer would have handled, and it is an incredible savings for us as it relates to time. The 50% share, I think we do get our dollars back as it relates to not sending a patrol officer to every school when something happens. And there's a lot of institutional knowledge that's housed with the SROs as it relates to the students. And they also provide additional information to us when there may be some criminal activity that occurs out on the street, outside of the school area. They have instant recognition of their students, essentially.
completely agree. The program is useful and on many fronts, and it's obviously a safety asset for the schools too. Just to keep us informed, I guess, as to how the discussions go in terms of restarting that discussion on a more equitable agreement with the fifth SRO.
I absolutely will, and I absolutely agree with you. They need to pull their freight on that fifth one.
And if we could have the breakout of what that 50% equates to, and the for the 9 months, that would be helpful, I think.
Mayor,
Yes.
the revenue from the school district is in line 4253. So that'll tell you the revenue coming in.
So what is the total cost for those 5 officers, 9 months?
We don't break that out, but we can get that to you. Again, it's rolled into the 6102 expense line item. But I just wanted to call attention to the revenue that we received.
Mayor, our revenue that we received for our SROs, we're projecting at $165,900.
Yeah, I see that. Okay, thanks. It'd be great if we could have that breakout of what the total cost is.
Well, the cost is that, I mean, if you're looking at the total cost, that would not be that number. That's what we charge them and they pay us. The other little thing, I mean, this was all negotiated before Chief Smith or myself. So this probably goes back 20 years. We also pay we get reimbursed for the lowest paid 4. So the most expensive SRO, that's the 5th one that we eat. So that's an additional benefit to them. But I think what you're asking for is what's the total cost, of which we're only getting reimbursed $165,900. Do I have that correct? Okay,
yes.
Good.
And then the other clarification is on the 2020 projections of the 104. You mentioned that we're not charging them for the months that they're not in the schools. So is that reflected in that projection for this year?
Are you speaking of the 2020's revenue or 2021's revenue?
The 2020 projected for 4253, the 104,000, is that already reflecting the lack of the contribution because the liaison officers are not in the schools currently?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Thank you.
Could I just ask if you could clarify kind of what the federal and state aid looks like? It looks has kind of fluctuated in the past.
Federal and state aid is generally any type of grants that we get. That's where we account for that revenue.
I think where Lindsay may be asking is that you've got state aid police, 182,800 for 2020 and then zeros. So something got moved around, I'm suspecting. I'm not sure if Russ knows the answer to that question. Was I tracking you, Lindsay?
Yeah,
that's what, and I didn't notice it earlier. So Russ, can you help?
To be honest with you, I could not hear the chief's initial response. I heard the question, and we're looking at things right now, but I didn't hear what chief's initial comments were.
Okay. I suspect, Russ, you may want to look at the answer. For some reason, the school district's reimbursements got coded in state aid. It's just because where the other government aid is zero is where there's something in state aid. So maybe there's some type of clerical coding type of error.
We actually coded that as other government aid to be more reflective of what that is. State aid, we were accounting for the reimbursements under state aid. And so we move that now into other government aid.
But that's not school district?
That is school district.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, yeah.
Does that answer your question, Lindsay?
I think she hopes, but I'm not even convinced. Russ,
So-
can you double check that, please?
Because it's looking like for 2020 projected, that's 0. So if that moved
Yeah.
to other aid lease, that's a different dollar amount. Yeah, that is a little confusing.
The old budget analyst in me tells me there's a coding issue. There's usually a logical explanation, but we owe you that answer. And if I had taught you the municipal finance class at UWO, that was one of the little tricks I would have told you. So, Mike, would you say there's something to that? Okay, good. We'll look at it, but we need to give you an answer.
The other question is, I did receive the budget enhancement sheet for the patrol officers, but I don't see the one for the storage, the extra storage. Is that somewhere else?
That's included within our base budget.
I see. It's not an enhancement. Okay.
Okay. I mean, the police
Mark-
department budget is pretty basic when 95% of the department budget is personnel. Your questions are personnel related. That's, you're asking the right questions because that's all they have. The big increase is because of the storage for the body cams, which Chief explained. The numbers for repairs to motor vehicles is holding its own because, to council's credit, we're replacing the vehicles and not putting off the replacement of them. That has a direct impact because these cars are worked hard, and if you don't replace them on a regular basis, you can either pay it in the motor vehicle section or in the repair section. 10 years ago, that line item was over $100,000. And that's what happens when you don't replace the vehicles. And Chief Smith has been sticking with getting those vehicles replaced. You'll see that in the capital outlay section. But I just probably took up another, third of his, probably 2/3 of his non-personnel budget, just in those line items alone. And then training is obviously a big issue because of the accreditation requirements we have and the need to train our employees.
Mark, I got one more question for the chief. Chief, I couldn't hear it, so I just want to get clarification. When you were talking about the potential budget enhancement that you're requesting with 2 full-times, you mentioned an offset possible on the overtime. I just couldn't hear the number. What was the potential offset?
Sure.
Matt, I think it's at the, on the budget enhancement, it looks like 49,700.
I must have an old sheet then. I don't have it on mine.
Oh,
This
okay. It came separately.
This would have been the one you got Friday in your packet. So depends on where you inserted it in your document.
Well, that would be a very good question. Yes.
Yeah, well, and I just remembered where I put mine, so don't. But the mayor's citing the number that I'm looking at too. But Dean, I'm not sure how much you were tracking this morning with the fire department, because it seems like you're saying the same things, but you're not illustrating it the same way. If there's a trade-off of direct savings in overtime with the expenditures, that's different than if you just are getting 2 extra folks added. So I think that's really the core of Matt's question is, are you saying they'll pay for themselves? And then I would, after our discussion this morning with fire, my inclination is not to add a permanent staffing increase, but authorize the chiefs to experiment and exceed their hiring allotment. And if they can achieve the savings in overtime to pay for it, I'm willing to entertain that. And with council's indulgence, I'll just do that and let them work with the line items with payroll. Dean, I'm not sure if you were tracking this morning what was going on.
And I certainly support that. I think that that's a great idea to give it a test run to see if we can attain those savings without actually committing real dollars to it. We already have the dollars there. See if we can make that savings happen. Again, I would be remiss though if I didn't tell you that I'm already going to be providing you $100,000 worth of savings from my salary based on attrition that we have. That was nice of you, Mark.
Gift that keeps on giving.
So I have my work cut out for me.
I mean, we can talk about it, Chief, if you'd like to.
Yeah.
And if there's council, what the chief doesn't want to, I don't think he wants to commit to the overtime savings. And I respect that because that's a tall order. So certainly council keep that in mind, but Chief and I can continue conversations offline and report back to you.
I will tell you that I'm starting to see the impact on my officers as it relates to all of the overtime, whether it be shift shortage overtime or other various overtime categories that we have coming to the end of the year. And I got some tired cops right now. They've been working hard this year. You wouldn't think that we'd be working hard based upon everything going on with COVID, but they've been working real hard and they're getting tired.
Chief, what are some examples of, I guess, some reasons for that, that they're working harder during this period of time? Are there more calls for service? And maybe you said this earlier, it was a little bit muffled. If you can elaborate a little bit on that.
Well, we have had, we just came out of a 13 officer quarantine where we had some COVID positives appear at the police department, which caused us to have shift shortages. We have several officers who are injured. We probably have, I know we do. We have the highest workers' comp claims of the city. We're your biggest liability. We get a lot of police officers hurt, and that certainly impacts our ability to put officers on the street. We've additionally spent about $35,000 on our mobile field force in order to keep the city safe over the last several months. That's additional fatigue on our officers. It's kind of like life. Life happens, and we have to deal with it. We can't just say we're not coming. We have to continue to come, and I have to continue to encourage the officers to be responsive.
Can you talk a little bit? I read the annual report that came last week. Can you talk a little bit about what the mobile field force does or has been doing this year?
That is our, in the simplest terms, in the down and dirty, that's our riot squad. That is our team that's available for all the pub crawls. They're specially trained in crowd control. That's the teams that have been available during the recent unrest that have been occurring across the state, as well as here in the city. That's the team that we call on when we have any type of visitors from outside in the Washington, D.C. area. They're the ones that respond to that one. Any special need related to crowd control, that would be the team that we would use to take care of that.
And we sometimes send those folks out of town, right? To help other communities.
We do. Because one day we may need them.
Yeah.
To us, and I have to play in the same ball field with everybody else.
Just a kind of a question I asked Chief Stanley this earlier today. As it relates to the shift shortages and the overtime, if there was a magic answer in terms of producing additional social workers, mental health workers, to assist with some of the calls that your folks handle, is there a way of identifying, how many calls for service might reduce over time if there were those additional resources in the community to respond to some of the nonviolent calls for behavioral and mental health substance abuse?
That would be a hard number to quantify. It's my belief that mental health and crisis intervention go hand in hand with law enforcement. We recognize that there's persons who have a maintenance need for mental health. Those are people that every day they have ongoing issues, and those are readily handled by folks who are social workers, by counselors, by licensed mental health workers. Those are easier, I will say, for them to handle. What we deal with is those persons who are in crisis. We deal with those persons who, at that moment, need help. Just as I shared with you, we had the gentleman standing in the driveway with a gun to his head. We don't have time to wait for somebody. Essentially, county social services or county mental health, they don't have the staffing to help us from an 8 to 4 Monday through Friday when we call for help. We have to be ready and able to respond to any need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. As a matter of fact, just today, we had a person trying to jump off one of the overpass bridges across 41, and our officers were able to talk him out of that, bring him out of crisis, and we were able to get him the help that he needed. It's that moment of need that our officers are responding to, which is why the de-escalation training and the crisis intervention training is so incredibly important. So taking a reading as to the needs that we have for us, we respond to people that have a need right now. It's not an appointment. It's not a can you come visit us when you have the opportunity? They call for help now. I want to say we had approximately last year we had 2,700 mental health and welfare check calls here in the city. That's 2,700 times that we were called in order to take care of some folks. Certainly some of those could be handled from a different response level than us, and I certainly welcome that. I believe in a model where we partner with counselors when they're available to respond to these high incident calls. I certainly subscribe to that. I'm hoping that the U.S. Department of Justice Community and Policing Office will deliver on the statement that they made that they intend to provide some funding for alternative responses. We're waiting to see what those grant opportunities might look like. As soon as they hit, I want to be a part of that, and I want us, the city, to be participating in that, because there is value in having a mental health worker partnering with law enforcement. I have spoke to some social workers. I have spoke to some counselors. You'd be hard pressed to get one to respond to any of these calls by themselves. Remind you of what happened in Appleton last year. Unfortunately, tragically, we lost a firefighter in Appleton. That was a person who was on a bus and he was down because of an overdose. He was provided Narcan. He came out of his overdose. He got into crisis. He pulled out a gun. He shot 4 people. That's what is in the mind of anybody and everybody related to somebody in a mental health crisis. And we just can't put people who aren't prepared for that in that situation. We need to be the best police officers that we can be the best trained that we can be so we can de-escalate these situations. But we need to have a model that works for everybody. We need to make sure that what we're doing is boots on the ground, on the street, ready to respond when need be, with the most professional response that we can possibly provide.
And thanks for that detailed explanation. I guess the other question, going back to the couple of patrol officers, with the rates of overdoses and suicides and overdose related deaths, is that increase that we've seen over the past year are 2 officers even enough considering the other shift shortages? You know, if we were to see that trend continue?
No. I'd like to say that it is. One of the items that are in our strategic plan is, during the previous iteration of the plan, we were going to be creating our law enforcement addiction assistance program. We've got that standing up now. Now we need to advertise it and we need to make it work. And that's where somebody who really wants to have some help as it relates to addiction can reach out to the police department. We provide them amnesty. We don't charge them with anything. We're not going to charge them. We're not going to arrest them. We're going to do a warm handoff to some counselors that we've already engaged in order to hopefully provide them the support that they need. So our strategic plan indicates that we're going to start promoting that better than we've been able to in the past. But that's a long answer. But the short answer is no. 2 officers won't alleviate that. I do hope that when we fully stand up our Bison Narcotics unit again, and we're able to conduct the investigations that we were very successful on early on, that will at least start to slow some of that down. But I can't tell you that COVID is the cause of it. I will tell you that during COVID, we've had this rapid increase. But I appreciate the fact that you recognize that that's a huge problem for us. That amount of overdoses increase is just incredible.
And you said they would have been higher had you not had those Narcan donations, eh?
That's correct. Absolutely. You've never actually experienced we'll call it a resurrection unless you've seen somebody who actually gets revived on Narcan. They can be absolutely not breathing, laying on the ground, and within minutes they're up and talking to you. It's amazing.
Could I just ask you a quick question about related to Narcan? Are you able to kind of quantify how much donations that you receive to pay for Narcan, and do you think that will continue?
The community foundation in this particular case, I want to say the original donation was about $7,500, and 2 doses run $75 for 2 doses. We use nasal Narcan where the fire department will use the intravenous Narcan. They actually provided additional funding for us to replace what we haven't used already because some of it has expired. And I believe that if I need it, I can go back and get more. I can get more funding from the foundation, but that's an ask, and I need the proper response, which would be yes. Regardless of whether or not I get the donation or not, we will continue to buy it. I'll find a way.
You know, usually it's a little bit of a stretch when you say a donation saves lives, but every Narcan donation we get literally saves a life. So yeah, we're going to do it no matter what because we have to. It's very helpful that the generosity of the community is making that happen. And I think there are plenty of people out there who realize the benefit that the Narcan does. And I don't think they want the chief or any of our officers to be shorthanded and say, if I only had, a dose of Narcan here. So
I wish I had not seen what that could do up close and personal. So if you guys, if it's challenging for you guys to get that, there's been some other community programs that have talked about and implemented Narcan in households. Is that, and I don't know, actually, maybe Lindsay, you may know more about that, but Chief, I don't know if there's any experience with, or you have thoughts on that as well.
I know that we have found some of our persons that we have arrested for possession of narcotics, heroin. They have had their own supply of Narcan. We have also had some deaths where they tried to administer Narcan and it did not work. So I do know that they are in some of our households.
Mm-hmm.
And the health department does provide nasal Narcan for free to anyone who needs it. So.
You're muted, Mark.
Mark, unmute.
I was not muted, and then I muted myself before I talked. Obviously there's, we could talk about some of these issues, and certainly we're doing well on time. There's a few more budgets, but I want council to have the opportunity to talk to Chief about these issues. But because it's all about personnel. Chief, is there anything else that you wanted to point out? You already mentioned, you did your little spiel to support Chief Stanley's general request, and HR. Just to let you know, since council's discussion this morning, HR has been swirling with activity about doing research on tuition reimbursement. So thank you for having that very vibrant discussion this morning. So I appreciate that. Chief, anything else? I know we've got to do animal care and crossing guards. I think that's about it for you. Is there anything else in the operating budget?
We have the auxiliary budget.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So other than those three, is there anything else, or council members? I don't want to cut it off. Those other budgets are very, very small and very specific and relatively minor. The advantage of the police department budget, it's all in one big account, but it's a big account, and
that's the
lots of
disadvantage
moving
of the police
parts.
department budget.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I guess I just appreciate that, there is a very conservative view of the projection on special event revenue with PD. I know we talked about that with fire department, didn't quite get adjusted as much, but
Russ has a report on that, because that was a little bit more homework that Russ and his staff did at lunchtime. Russ,
Just fire department, special event revenue down for 2020 and 2021.
Yeah, our number that we provided for our revenue estimate is about a 50% reduction. We want to be conservative. We want to promise low and deliver high. So we hope that we certainly hope that special events come back, but we can't predict the future. But by coming in at a 50% reduction, I feel pretty comfortable with that. Saying all that, we just had Kusa and Rusa file for bankruptcy, so
yeah.
But our contribution to that is minimal as it relates to overtime, where most of that expense comes with the sheriff's department to provide the interior security, where we did the traffic direction for that.
I just had a follow-up question regarding the sheriff's department as it relates to PD. So I noticed in the progress report that fire department provided, there were some recommendations that came out of, I think it was the staffing study, about some potential changes that would could be made at the sheriff's department regarding communication and something about part-time staff and that. Does that impact PD as well?
Well, the sheriff's department actually operates the PSAP, the Public Safety Answering Point, for the whole county. I will tell you that they are having a struggle hiring full-time employees, let alone part-time. I believe they're down eight communication operators right now, which is a huge impact on their operations. Any changes that they make for fire dispatch would not impact what they do for police dispatch.
I guess I was maybe wrongly assuming that was 911 dispatch, which would go across both. Okay, thank you.
It is 911 dispatch. That's where 911 calls go to. But their protocols for dispatching fire are far different than the protocols that we have for dispatching police, where they will have a set protocol. They'll have a set protocol related to the amount of apparatus that may be responding to a particular type of fire call or rescue call. For us, we have a person requirement. If we have a disturbance going on or a domestic assault going on, we're going to send 2 patrol cars to it. If we have a transport of somebody out of the city for any various reasons, we're going to send 2 officers to that. If we have a traffic accident with injuries, we will send at least 2 officers to that. One officer to investigate the accident, the other one to handle traffic control. So we develop our response models based on the types of calls that we answer.
Thanks for that. So is everybody ready to go on to those next sections?
I promise to get you all done relatively quickly on these too. So we're moving on to the animal care budget, which is page 67. We notified, in case, for those of you who may not know, the Oshkosh Humane Society, they generally handle the housing of all strays that we may come in contact with here in the city. They handle it primarily for most of Winnebago County. We help fund them a portion of their budget for that service that they provide to us. We also provide some trained humane officers through our CSO program, as well as our patrol officers. So when we get an animal call, our community service officer or our humane officer will respond to those calls and investigate any calls that may be related to a cruelty to an animal call or a malnourished animal call. Anything related to animals, we would primarily send one of our community service officers or our humane officer to that. But the $97,400 that goes to the Humane Society, they become the repository, if you will, of all animals that we may seize throughout the year. That's cheap too. So moving on from the animal care budget, if there's no questions, we go to the auxiliary budget, which is page 69. I'm confident that each of you are very familiar with our auxiliary unit. They've been in existence since the 50s. They provide hundreds and hundreds of hours of voluntary service to the city, to any of our special events, to any scene where we need long-term traffic control. They provide that service to us at really no charge to the city. That means I don't have to provide a police officer to stand at an intersection and direct traffic in some instances. We also don't need to provide officers to certain special events where we can provide auxiliary to them. And their budget, it's $5,900 in the whole big scheme of things. The return on that investment is incredible for us. And I can't thank them for the amount of work that they provide to the city at no charge. Any questions on that? All right, and finally moving on to crossing guards, which is page 72. We are by statute, and this is arguable in some cities now. Russ may chime in that he was able to at some point move away from crossing guards, but we provide crossing guard coverage to our school district, and it comes out of our operating budget to do so. I've got 18 full-time crossing guards at various locations across the city. I also have 3 part-timers that fill in along the way. They provide services related to certainly children trying to walk their way to school. And most of these, as you probably know, are going to be retirees that are looking to either get out of the house or it provides them some additional income. It's a very modest budget amount as it relates to the amount of staff and the coverage that they provide, $87,500. We provide them their uniforms and other supplies as well. And that's it for crossing guard.
So you said that we're required by state statute. So does Russ have some other information to share on that other cities are interpreting that differently? Are school districts contributing?
Well, I have some other experiences, but I don't know if now's the right time to talk about that. I guess we're looking at the status quo for 2021, but maybe as time permits, I could do a little bit more research and give you a report.
I will tell you that Appleton went to a contract model where they do not actually employ their crossing guards. They contract that service out to an independent company. A couple other jurisdictions across the state have done that. I want to say 2 years ago, several jurisdictions were contracted with one particular company. That company went out of business, and at the last minute, the police department was scrambling to provide school crossing guard services to those jurisdictions. We have to provide it, and it was far more expensive from what I saw with what Appleton is doing than what we currently are paying for our school crossing guards.
I see.
One of the things that I think some communities have tried to do is if they're looking to add to the crossing guard contingent, particularly when they do more at one school, then there's depending on how you read the statute, you can say, well, it doesn't say we have to, says if you have them, you got to provide them, but if you want more than the current contingent, you need to pony up some money. You'll recall that when Smith School closed, and there was a desire for an additional crossing guard over at Jefferson, we merely moved the guard over there. So we continue to eat the same cost we had. We just applied the personnel to a different intersection near Jefferson rather than eliminate the one at Smith.
And I do get requests throughout the school year to add guards, and I hold the line as to what we currently are providing at 18. If there was a need for more and it was demonstrated, I would come to you and ask for that. But a lot of it is a lot of the things we're able to do is creatively work through some signage. I worked with Jim Collins at some locations where we could provide a four-way stop, and that was specifically over at Jefferson as well to alleviate some other needs for that they had. But we'll look at traffic control devices to try to help with that if need be.
Okay.
All right.
Well, Chief, you went 1 hour and 4 minutes. That's pretty darn good given the depth of discussion that we had. So thank you so much. We have a few items that we wrote down, follow-up things for the council, and we'll be following up with you on those and other items that we jotted down over the course of the last couple of days. Is there anything else for Chief Smith? You're welcome to keep listening in, Chief, but I don't know if anybody has anything specific for the chief.
Recognize that we do have some various CIP items, but I'm open for any conversation with that as well.
I don't think so. It doesn't appear so. Do we still have, Bob, are you still with us, or you just signed in and ghosted? Well, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Hey, Bob.
Chief.
That concludes the departmental presentations. In the few minutes we have before we're due to finish, I guess next steps for us, we'll certainly have something on next week's agenda for general discussion. As the mayor pointed out, on our budget schedule, we did have something about council giving some ideas that they would like to put on for discussion. When the council meets on November 10th, do I have my dates right? On November 10th, that's when you'll be adopting the budget. What we typically do is we collect different amendments that the council would like that an individual council member or one or more would like the entire council to entertain. We'll put those in a summary form, and we have a little spreadsheet that we kind of keep a running total so we can track expenditure restraint as well as levy impact, if any of those decisions do have that impact. But the idea would be to have a little discussion next week at the regular council meeting. And then at the November 4th work session, we do have the public hearing that starts at 5 o'clock. And then the way the agenda will read, the discussion with council will immediately ensue after the hearing. So if one person shows up, we can start after that. If a dozen people show up, we can, we'll just go to the budget workshop after that.
So Mark, I think it was last year, maybe the last 2 years, we got the proposed amendments like on the Friday before. So if council members are submitting any amendments, up through Friday, would you anticipate that we would have that spreadsheet to consider?
If you give me something this Friday, I will put it in this Friday's agenda packet. And if you give me something the following Friday, we'll add to that list. So we want to compile it because everybody's thinking about this at different times. Something gets said and triggers it. So the mayor's experience and recollection is very good. The whole idea is if you want to make some amendments to the budget, we want to give you the opportunity to vet those out. The sooner you do it, the better. If you give it to us Monday, and I can just tell you from experience, the ones that are introduced on Monday and Tuesday when the budget gets adopted don't get as much consideration as the ones that come earlier. And that's just so, especially for the new council members. A rookie council member a few years back proposed something right on Tuesday night, and it got tossed down. Not going to even get into what it was. It's just that has a tendency to happen. The earlier you talk about it, the better. I would suggest if you have something you want to put on the table, give it to us the sooner the better. We'll get it up there, and you can talk about it a little bit next Tuesday, and you'll also be able to talk about it at the cleanup budget work session on Wednesday, November 4th. So we want to give you as many opportunities to vet this out. I mean, you've given us 2 days, but this is pretty concentrated, and you need time to reflect.
Mark and the mayor?
Yes.
I'd just like to call your attention to page 1 of your budget document. It has the budget calendar. And as the city manager was saying, we have the public hearing scheduled for November 4th. That notice has already gone to the newspaper, followed by the work session. And I guess out of courtesy, we were asking for any potential budget changes or amendments or items presented to us by Friday, November 6th, so that we can get it to you before the council meeting on the 10th.
Yeah, all that talking the mayor and I were doing, it was there the whole time. So, but your recollection is that's how we've been doing it. It's been working pretty well. So we're happy to entertain those, I guess, a week from Friday. But if you've got some things you want to throw out on the table next Tuesday, there's, we can get the process started.
And just to be clear then, so there were those enhancements that were quote unquote budget neutral, that there were some, there was another that wasn't so budget neutral, but council should be reminded that can have, if you add those enhancements, is there room or not room in terms of expenditure restraint?
Russ, I'm tossing that one your way. What kind of capacity do we have under expenditure restraint? It's more of an expenditure restraint question, Madam Mayor. The levy is more of your digestive system. How much can you stomach on the levy side? But Russ, regarding the expenditure restraint, about how much capacity do we have?
We have a little bit. I don't have the exact dollar amount. I can have that for next council meeting. Again, the expenditure restraint program is still an estimate at this time. We have to get the finalized certified allowance from the state, and that's based on CPI through August or September, plus net new construction. I have an estimate, and it's like I can't remember what the number was, 2.53, but that's just an estimate at this point in time. So those budget enhancements that are not neutral will have to be weighed whether or not there's an impact.
And we'll work through those based on the discussions that ensued today. And we'll bring you back our observations at the latest that we would bring them to you would be at the November 4th meeting, because we would want you to have that information so that on the 4th, we've got a pretty good idea of where you're going. And, you can still throw some ideas out for the Amendment 2 draft. But for us, I think we owe it to you no later than that budget work session. So that's kind of it. Unless there's anything else.
Thank you, everybody, for your full attention and participation. I think this has been a better year for participation throughout the majority of the budget session. So not too bad considering we're all listening through a tunnel and 2D.
I didn't see any odds group, so thank you so much.
All right. Well, unless anybody has anything else, let's adjourn.
All right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Thank you.
Russ, why don't you call me?
Okay.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye, everybody.